Hello everyone, welcome back to the course of Introductions to General Linguistics. In these occasions, we are going to continue our discussions, and our discussions today is about major linguistic thoughts. In the end of these subjects, you will be able to explain 4 principles of linguistic thoughts that you should be familiar with. What are they? They are traditional approach, structuralism, generativism, and the last one is functionalism. Let's discuss this one by one. What is traditional approach? Traditional approach in linguistics refers to how language is seen traditionally as a unit of structures that is claimed to have similarities in other languages. So it sees the patterns and similarities between one language and another language. So the roots of the traditional grammars are in the works of the classic Greeks and also Latin philologists. When at that time, traditional grammarians thought that the Latin and Greek models of grammar could be the basis of the descriptions of any language. So they see these 2 languages is the basis of understanding other language patterns of grammar. And traditional grammarians also thought that in a language it should be compositions or structures such as subjects, verbs, object, adverb or part of speech, and also clause. So they think that in every sentence there should be subject, verb, object, adverb, and etc. The linguistic traditions of the ancient Greece and Rome greatly influenced the traditional grammar concepts as they are still used in our present practice, especially in the concept of teaching classical languages and teaching other languages. So they focusing on the pattern that you should have subject, verb, and etc. So when they believe that the language should be pure and correct, and any deviations from it is considered as corrupt or deceit forms of language. So it's like between correct rules, and those who do not follow this rule will be considered incorrect. So that's what we call as prescriptive, considering that the correct versions of language that community use, and it's compared to what it should be happening in the real conditions. So it means that prescriptive focusing on what is correct versions, meanwhile others in realities the performance of language will be different based on certain situations or contexts. However, this approach has limits, at least 2. The first one, it can never touch the area of psycholinguistics and social linguistics, as well as the pragmatics, since they only think about the fixed rule, not the descriptive one or the performance one in reality. And the second one, it can be limitedly applied in Proto-Indo-European language families because the structures of other languages are very far different. So it's exclusively limited only in Proto-Indo-Europeans where the Greek, Romans, and etc. are coming from, but not for other language family. So those are basic understanding about traditional approach. The second part is structuralism as other linguistic thought. So when we talk about structuralism, we should be familiar with the father of the modern linguistics, that's named Ferdinand de Saussure, which his influential work named Cours de linguistique générale. So the Saussure concept was influenced by Emile Durkheim, that stating that sociology was the science of the social fact, Therefore, socials see the language as the social facts that contains value, norms, as well as social structures. So structuralism is an approach to the linguistics that focuses on the idea that language are fixed system and made up of many different units that connects with each other. So how does structuralism view the language? Number one, that language is seen as behavioral or social phenomenon rather than mental phenomenon. So the linguistics analysis is only based on observables and static phenomena, something that we can see directly. So each level of language, like syntax, morphology, and phonology, should be independently analyzed, cannot be, let's say, integratively analyzed. Therefore, there is no universality in language because each language is exclusive in its structure. So the social concepts is that there's a terms for the language that's called as language. That is language in general, both spoken and written. Second, there's a concept called lang, L-A-N-G-U-E. That is a particular language with its system belongs to a particular society. And also parole, P-A-R-O-L-E, that is the actual use of language. Second of all, Saussure also considered that language is synchronic, that is static or present, instead of diachronics or across the time. So he thought that it is not necessary to see the present system of language by referring to the past. Like present is present, past is the past. Saussure also considered the concepts of semiotics, that is, science consists of signified or meaning and also signifier or mental image. Language is prescriptive, or what should it be, versus language is descriptive, what is in reality. Alright, and the third one is that language relations are paradigmatics or vertical relation, as well as syntagmatics or horizontal relations. So at least you know the terms about paradigmatics and syntagmatics first. The third linguistic thoughts is the generativisms. So generativisms emerged as a response to opposed American structuralisms from Leonard Bloomfield. So the works of the Noam Chomsky, that born in 1928, become the basis of the generative approach to linguistics. So what is it about? It was originally a way to explain why humans acquire language in the first place. So the generative theory of language stated that in its most basic form, language is actually made of certain rules that apply to all humans and all languages. So basically they have the certain similar rules regardless where that language comes from. So this led to the theory of the universal grammar, that all humans are capable of learning grammar or structures of language. So what are the characteristics of the Chomsky's theory? Number one is mentalism, that is, language is seen as a mental phenomenon, not a reaction to external stimuli. It is to formulate the thoughts and not to communicate them. Number two is deductionism, that it applies the deductive reasoning from general principle to the specific conclusions. And number three is explicitness, that is, the aim of the grammar is to formulate explicit descriptions of the implicit human linguistic competence. Alright, the next one is that Chomsky is also proposing the theory of the universalism, that all language are based on the same set of universal principle, or that we call it as the universal grammar. So it must be legitimate to use cross-linguistic data to analyze the structures of any language. The fifth one is the nativism, that is stating linguistic competence is actually innate and genetically transmitted. So language is acquired, not learned. Thus, in the process of language acquisition, the innate linguistic competence is adjusted to a given natural language. And the sixth one is transformationalism. What is that? Certain linguistic structures are derivable from other more basic structures. So by this approach, we analyze the sentence to a smallest unit. So the generativists assume to a different level of representation is both deep structures and also the surface structure. The last linguistic thought that we discussed today is functionalism. So what is functionalism? So when we talk about this, there will be influential figures for functionalist thought. That is Halliday, Caffey, Jespersons, and also Bollingers. So functionalism focuses on how language is used in everyday life, and the important points for this is the social context or the performance of the language itself. So functionalism emphasizes the importance of the social context, the usage, and the communicative functions of the grammars and in phonology, orthography, and more on a language. So it is reasonable to assume that its structures are best analyzed and understood with the reference to the functions that they carry out. So in functionalism, the key is that how the language serves many kinds of functions in society. So the context where linguistics elements are used and studied are instrumentally useful or functional in the given environments. So functional grammar makes much use of corpus linguistics and also linguistic typology to provide material because they want to see the broader context of the language use. So corpus linguistics is important here. So functionalists try to explain competence often on the basis of the performance because competence is affected by the performance. And everyone recognizes that grammars are full of arbitrariness, but functionalists emphasize non-arbitrariness and explain wherever possible. So functionalists allow exceptions. So exceptions of different rules or let's say distinctive features in a language is okay. So empirical coverage is broader then. So to sum up this is that each thought has its own perspective to say the language. It's all about fixed or modified systems, innate or learned, and it is in the system, in the human mind, or the realizations of it. So this is the end of our discussions about linguistic thought. See you in another occasions, and see you in the next meetings of Introductions to General Linguistics.